Thank you very much, Julia and Deborah. And well, it's not easy to be last in the last time slot in a presentation. Probably people are very tired, but I appreciate your being here and your energy of being here present. As Julia mentioned, this presentation is going to be a bit different from others. We are going to provide an overview of what research related to PIAAC has been done, and a little bit of the evolution and the current state of PIAAC-related research. My name is Daniel Hernandez Torrano. I come from Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan, and I will be presenting this paper on behalf of a few colleagues that are listed in the slide, based both in Germany and in Kazakhstan. It's great to present it to an audience that is familiar with PIAAC, so I can make the introduction and the rationale very brief, but broadly speaking, PIAAC is an international scale study that was launched in 2008 with the idea of providing governments useful information about the skills of their adult populations. And this was done with the assumption that the experts, policymakers, scholars, from different disciplines will use the data to make interesting insights about adult skills. So over the last 15 plus years, from the moment that PIAAC was conceptualized, there has been a lot of research accumulating related to PIAAC, and this conference is an obvious evidence of these efforts. However, there have been a few efforts to synthesize this evidence, and even though we have very good examples of this evidence synthesis, we have examples of ICT literacy, adult learning, or skill mismatch that have been very useful in understanding a bit how these issues relate to adult skills. What is missing and what we think this paper and this presentation can address is a more overview, larger data-driven overview of all the research that has been conducted using PIAAC-related data. The previous research evidence synthesis that have been published, they normally use traditional approaches such as meta-analysis, systematic lit reviews. We take a different approach, which we believe is not better or worse, it's just complementary, and we use a bibliometric approach. That one of the advantages is that you can collect and analyze much larger data sets and pieces of information. And normally, systematic review meta-analysis, they normally work with a few dozen papers. When you use a bibliometric approach, you can account for tens, hundreds, or even sometimes thousands of publications. And that's what we are trying to do in this analysis. More specifically, what we are looking at is to provide a quantitative data-driven synthesis to uncover what is the state, current state, evolution and development of PIAAC-based research using this bibliometric approach. And we focus on 5 different dimensions. We focus to understand what has been the growth trajectory of PIAAC-based research. We look at the productivity of authors, institutions, and countries producing research related to PIAAC. We look at the social structure of the field, meaning how people collaborate when doing research about PIAAC. We look at the intellectual structure as well, and there are a few interesting insights that we want to provide. And finally, we look at the conceptual structure, or in other words, the themes, the topics that have been addressed in the whole field of PIAAC research. We aim to answer 6 related research questions, and our findings are going to be addressing those. But before I go to the findings, very importantly, methodology, we use a similar approach. You can imagine systematic reviews and meta-analysis. We identified relevant studies. Normally, I've done other bibliometric reviews in other areas and other themes. Normally, what you will do is you will identify a list of relevant keywords that capture the essence of the field you are analyzing, and you will find relevant publications in databases such as Scopus, Web of Science, and so on. In this paper, we use a different approach. We take advantage of the very good and comprehensive PIAAC bibliography that is reviews, maintained and updated by GISES. This is perhaps the most comprehensive list of research related to PIAAC that is in existence. And at the time we did the analysis up to research produced in 2022. There were nearly 900 publications, not only research articles, publications related to PIAAC. So research questions number 1 and 2 are based on these nearly 900 publications. Research question number 3 to 6, we use a subsample of these publications. In particular, we use 410 research articles that include DOI. The reason for that is because this analysis required additional information, and we had to extract additional metadata from Scopus, Web of Science, and also manually to complement the information from these publications. I'm referring to things, for example, like keywords of the papers, abstracts, the list of references, and so on. So we use, as mentioned, a bibliometric approach, and we use basic frequency counts for research questions number 1 and 2, a bit more sophisticated social network analysis for research questions number 3 to 6. So very briefly for research question number 1, how has research in PIAAC evolved through time? You can see the figure there with the number of publications that have been produced in each year from 2008 to 2021. And you can see we can divide this developmental period in 3 clearly defined stages. One is the inception phase, in which very few publications were produced every year until the release of the data for cycle 1, round 1 in 2013. Then we identify a developmental stage in which there is a considerably growth in the number of publications, especially in 2008, after the release of the cycle 1, round 3 data. And then when we consider a maturation phase in which the number of publications does not increase, remains stable, even decreases a little bit in 2021. Now, I was wondering how you will be able to see. I think the font size is good, but very quickly, we were interested also in providing some descriptive analysis on what kind of data is used, what type of data sets are used, and nearly 60% of the publications in the bibliography uses public user files, and about 1 every 4th paper uses scientific user files. When we look at the coverage of the publications, what countries are addressed in these publications, we can see clearly a big volume of research produced in about Germany, US, Finland, Denmark, and United Kingdom. And basically, most of the countries that are included and participating in PIAAC are listed in this table. Now, when we look at the productivity, as I mentioned, we look at who are the most productive authors contributing to PIAAC research. We look at that from the author perspective, institution perspective, and also country perspective. In this presentation, we focus on the country perspective, so we look at which countries are the most producers, the biggest producers of research related to PIAAC. This is based on the country of affiliation of the authors that publish the papers. We can see here a clear outstanding position of both Germany and the United States, but also representation of other countries, mostly again participating in PIAAC. We look at how many scholars contribute to PIAAC-based research. We identify almost 700 unique scholars contributing, affiliated with nearly 430 institutions across 37 countries. Again, this is very descriptive. What I think might be more interested, and this is the research question number 3, is about how people collaborate when doing research in PIAAC. So we did a social network analysis for a few of these research questions, and what you are seeing there is a network in which the nodes, the circles you see there, in this case the unit of analysis is authors, scholars of these publications. And what you can see is the size of the node represents the number of publications these authors have produced in the data set. The lines might be not very obvious, but these nodes are connected by lines. The thicker the line, the more co-author publications these two authors have produced. So this reflects the networks of collaboration. And finally, the colors that are more obvious represent groups of authors, in this case, that are publishing, co-authoring papers frequently together. So what we can see, and this is going to be obvious in this slide and also in the next one, is that the research in PIAAC is very collaborative. 80% of the publications are done in collaboration between authors, but only 23% are done as part of international collaboration networks. So only 23% of the papers of these 410 research articles that we analyze more intensively are done in collaboration between at least 2 authors from different countries. So in this slide in particular, you can see that there are these groups of collaboration. Normally these are research groups. The most prominent you can see is the pink one with Beatrice Ramstedt as the leader of this network, but you can see also other prominent figures and their research groups. Now, the fact that there is a limited international collaboration is even more obvious when you look at these collaborations between institutions, and you can see there is a series of frequently collaborating institutions. The largest network of collaboration between institutions is led by GISIS, the Levin Institute Social Sciences Center. That includes mostly relationships of universities within Germany and a few other European countries, as well as North America and Asia. There are also evidence of a few small international networks in which you will see, for example, in East Brown, there are different universities collaborating in PIAAC research from different European countries. But most of the times what you will see is that these networks of collaborations happen within countries. So all of these networks are groups of institutions collaborating together within countries. For example, the blue network you see on the top right are universities. You perhaps cannot read the name, but these are all universities in the US collaborating together to do research in PIAAC. Now for the intellectual structure, we did a few analyses. A very simple one, we wanted to know where research based on PIAAC is produced. In this case, we identified 210 unique journals publishing research in PIAAC. If you see the list of the journals publishing the highest volume of research, you can see at the top of the list is the Large-Scale Assessments in Education journal with 19 publications. And you can see in the list and you will find that a lot of these very prominent journals are in the area of education, but there is also evidence of publications in other areas such as economics, social science, and other multidisciplinary areas. Perhaps more interesting is to understand what are the disciplines underlying the foundation of PIAAC-based research. So this is a different kind of network analysis. It's called co-citation analysis. Not to go in much detail, but this analysis looks at the references in the papers published related to PIAAC. And it groups the references based on the journals in which these papers in the references are published, and groups them based on their co-citation relationship, meaning that two journals are co-cited if a third journal cites them. And the more often two journals are co-cited, the more semantically related are expected to be. And they group in these clusters. You can see there are 4 clusters that represent 4 disciplines from which PIAAC-based research emerges. And these are educational sciences. All the journals and sources in the blue cluster are educational science journals. Psychology is the other discipline from which this research emerges. That's the purple network. Economics is the red network, and sociology is the the green network. So 4 disciplines contribute to the development of PIAAC-based research. Then another interesting analysis I hope you find interesting is what have been the historical development paths in which PIAAC research is based. So this is an analysis called historiographic analysis, and what it does, in our case, we identify the 25 most cited papers in our data set, and we analyze how these very cited influential papers, they cite each other in this temporal trend. So what you will see there is 3 clusters. Each of these clusters represents a developmental historical path in PIAAC research. The red cluster is the initial and early developmental path that represents, before most of the times PIAAC data was available, theoretical and methodological approaches to measuring adult skills with a seminal paper by Andreas in 2008. Then we have another historical path represented by the green cluster that addresses cognitive skills and in particular problem solving in technology-rich environments with some very well-known cited publications. And finally, we have a blue cluster that is a mix of different studies on the role of adult literacy for social and economic development addressed by from different disciplines, sociology research, psychology research, and economic research. Finally, and perhaps more interesting, is the analysis based on the themes. This analysis is also a social network analysis. In this case, when you see the unit of analysis are keywords of research published around PIAAC. So the bigger the node, the bigger the circle, the more often this keyword appears in papers based on PIAAC. Again, there is a connection between these nodes, the lines connecting. The thicker the line, the more often these 2 keywords appear together, and the color represents clusters of frequently occurring keywords. So you can see there are two main clusters, two main themes addressed in PIAAC research. Not surprisingly, one is cognitive skills, problem solving mostly, education and human capital and labor market. That's a yellow cluster. The other one is literacy, numeracy, adult education and lifelong learning, represented by the red cluster. Not surprising, perhaps more interesting are the smaller clusters that appear in the analysis, which again represents themes in the literature. One is occupational mismatch, another one is non-cognitive skills, mostly personality, another one is methodology and data curation, like issues about the data analysis and methodologies. Another one is problem solving, automatization and technology-rich environments, informal learning, return to skills, aging and health literacy, and finally trust as a brown cluster you can see a bit more separated from the rest in the social network analysis. As a conclusion, as a summary of the findings, we can see PIAAC is a very young research field, but still very well differentiated. It has, we can identify three very well differentiated stages of inception, development, and maturation. We believe and expect that with the release of PIAAC's cycle 2 data, this number of publications will again increase in a further stage. Productivity is concentrated mostly around Germany and US, with other Northern European countries involved, but this is definitely linked to stronger institutional infrastructures that these countries have to support the research in PIAAC. Then collaboration is very frequent, however, it happens mostly at the national level, with limited cross-border collaborations in this research. 4 disciplines emerging, or research in PIAAC emerges from 4 differentiated disciplines: education, psychology, economics, and sociology. 2 main themes addressed in the literature, as I mentioned, but other themes also being present there, a bit less prominently, but also importantly. And then finally, future opportunities for PIAAC research. Again, we believe that the cycle 2 data will increase not only the number of publications, but the diversity of the themes, perhaps with the addition of the social-emotional skills items. Greater international collaboration would be expected or would benefit the field, engaging in more international collaborations. And finally, despite the fact that many of the top journals in the field seem to be from education, a bit of more integrated educational approaches to PIAAC research will be beneficial. I forgot to mention this is a paper that has been already published this year in 2025 in the International Review of Education journal. So I invite you to look at the analysis in more detail. You can scan the QR code or find the paper by the title. So you can look at not only the analysis we presented, but also additional analyses that are included in the appendices. Thank you very much for your attention and wish you a good final stage of the conference. Thank you very much.